Hi everyone, this is Jane Gov with Pasadena Public Library, and in this lesson we are making fresh handmade pasta with a sweet corn lemon sauce. To view the full recipe, please check out our team's blog. Thanks, and let's get started. Okay, so first we're going to start with the pasta dough, wet ingredients. So get your eggs, and we're going to crack 2 eggs into a separate bowl. And for the third egg, we just need the yolk. So separate the whites and the yolk, and then add the yolk into the bowl with the other eggs. And you can just set aside the extra whites for now. You may or may not need it for this. Next, you're going to need olive oil. You're going to add 1 tablespoon into the bowl. Then get a fork and lightly beat the eggs and the oil together. Then you can set that aside for now. Next, get 3/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of semolina flour. You'll need about a teaspoon of dried oregano and then some salt. Then get a sifter. I have a really small one, so I'm going to add this in portions. So add in your flour. I just put half of it, and then a little bit of semolina. I'm just alternating. Add more flour and finish off the semolina, and then just sift that all together onto your work surface. Next, add a big pinch of salt. I didn't measure, but I think this is probably about 1/4 of a teaspoon. Just sprinkle it in. And then get a teaspoon of dried oregano. If you already have oregano that is crushed, you don't need to crush it. You can just sprinkle it in. But since the ones that came in the kits are whole dried oregano, we are going to crush it by hand and sprinkle it in. Next, make a really big well in the middle of the flour mixture. You're gonna need to fit in the entire egg mixture in the middle without it running off to the side. So make sure this well is really big with a bit of flour on the edge, on every edge. Then pour in your egg mixture. right into the center of the well. And then slowly pull in the flour on the edges. Make sure to not have too many large clumps in there, but this process would probably take you a couple of minutes, not too long. So just mix it all in together with the fork. Once most of the flour is mixed in, you can start kneading it by hand. You'll need to knead it for approximately 8 to 10 minutes, so go ahead and set a timer. What I'm doing here is I'm still continuing to incorporate the flour that's on the surface. So to knead, I am grabbing the bottom of the dough and tucking it into the center. And we're just going to keep doing this for the time being. One thing to watch out for as you are kneading your dough and as you're sprinkling more flour into your dough is to not add too much all at once because you don't want to dry out your dough. So as you're kneading it, just sprinkle a little bit at a time if the dough is getting too sticky. And keep doing this until you're done kneading. The measurements for this dough recipe should actually give you a stickier dough or wetter dough. So you shouldn't need to add any more liquids. But if, however, your dough does turn out to be too dry and you're not able to knead it, what you can do is get that extra egg white that we've set aside earlier, and you can mix in, just beat in about a tablespoon of water, and you can wet your hands and knead it that way to add more water into your dough. I didn't need to do that for this recipe, but in the future, if you happen to run across that issue with your dough being too dry, that's what you can do. So what I'm doing here is I'm just poking the dough to see if it's springing back really easily, and that's a test to see if you've kneaded it enough. So I've just poked it a few times and it didn't rise quickly enough, so I'm just kneading it for another minute, and then I'll do the poke test again. Okay, so I think this is done. So you can see that all the flour is incorporated, and I'm poking the dough, and the dough is just rising really easily. So what we're gonna do is get plastic wrap, and we're gonna wrap it up. I'm flattening it out first. Then getting the plastic wrap, and just wrap it up. And then we're gonna leave it on the surface here, just in room temperature, and let it rest for about 30 minutes to an hour. So here's the first test. It's been 30 minutes, my timer went off. So what I'm gonna do is just poke the top here and see if it rises. So what we are looking for now is for the dough not to rise. So, and you can see that it's rising slowly, so we're gonna leave it out for another 15 minutes. Okay, so now it's been 45 minutes, and I've done the poke test, and the dough is ready. So it's not rising when poked. So now we are going to roll it out. First, flour your surface slightly. Gonna unwrap your dough. Gonna put a little flour on top there. And then I'm gonna cut it into quarters, and this is so that we could work with the dough a little easier. So we're just gonna work with a quarter of the dough at a time. Right. And then wrap up the rest of your dough and set it aside until you're ready to roll it out. And as you're rolling it out, again, be careful about how much extra flour you're adding in, because you don't want the dough to be too dry. And then we're going to roll it out as thin as we can get it. If you don't like the triangle edges, you can just fold it into thirds and continue rolling it out, and this should give you more of a rectangle to work with. Or you can slice off the edges if you would like. Keep rolling it out until you can get it to a really thin dough. Oh, and also, I probably wouldn't fold it more than 2 times if you can help it. Sometimes I don't fold it at all. Just really depends on your preference. But what I did here is I folded it twice so I can get more of a square shape, but in the next few rollouts, you'll see that I didn't fold them at all. So roll it as thin as you can get it. It's going to get to almost paper thin, and you'll be able to see your hands through the sheet, and that's how thin you'll want to get it. It took me about 5 minutes to get it to the thinness that I was looking for. So take your time, it might take a while. I'm just looking at it, and you can see in the video that you can sort of see my hand through the dough there, and this is ready. So finally, I'm lifting the dough off the surface so it doesn't stick when I cut it, and then I'm going to fold it into quarter-ish, and then cut the dough. In this first one, I'm going to cut fettuccine. But if this is your first time making pasta and you're not quite sure if your dough is too wet or too dry, but mostly wet is what I would be concerned about, because your dough might stick together, and in that case I would recommend cutting pappardelle, which is thicker pasta, and you'll see that a little bit later. Just to start off with, and then you can try out some of the other shapes. Once you're done cutting, carefully unravel the pasta, and then you can set it aside to dry out, or you can cook it immediately. For my next batch, I am going to make bow tie pasta. So again, roll it all out until you can get it as thin as you can, where you can see your hand through the dough. And then we are going to cut and shape them. Okay, so for bow tie, you are going to cut about 1.5 inches across. And then you're going to cut about 1 inch height. And then finally, pinch each rectangle into the center with 3 fingers to make that bow tie shape. And finally, with the remaining dough, again, roll it out as thin as you can get it until you can see your hand through the sheet of pasta. And then I am going to cut pappardelle with this batch, which is really thick pasta. If you're not going to be cooking your pasta right away, I recommend hang drying them. So I just have a wooden spoon here, and I'm just hanging these strips over the spoon. And then what you're going to do later is place it on 2 equally tall items to dry it out overnight. And there you can see the pasta drying. I also have the bow tie just resting on the cutting board. And I'm going to leave it there for about 24 hours. All right, to cook the pasta, just boil water. Boil a big pot of water and add a really large pinch of salt. Then add your pasta. And then give it a stir, making sure that these strands aren't sticking together. So for fresh pasta, it cooks really fast, maybe 2 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes usually. So I would taste it to check if it's done. So taste it after a minute, taste it after another minute, and just see. Obviously, if you rolled out your pasta thicker, you would need longer to cook it. So, but from what I can tell for this recipe, it's about 2 to 4 minutes would be good. So my fresh made fettuccine finished cooking in about 2 minutes. So what I'm doing here before I drain it is I am ladling out about a cup of this pasta water because you might need it for your sauce later. So after you get enough, you can drain your pasta. You can top your pasta with any sauce, but what I am making for this pasta is I am going to make a corn lemon sauce. It's really easy. So first get your lemon and then wash it and then just slice it in half and set that aside. Then get your corn and drain it. I am going to be using only about half the amount of corn because I'm not making much pasta. So there's half the corn. Then we are going to finely chop the corn. You can use a blender if you'd like or a food processor, but I am going to just hand chop this. So gather them all up together and use a big knife and chop them all the way through until you get some finely minced corn. So I'm just wiping up some excess water there. Okay, so this looks good. Finally chop all that up. And then we are going to make the sauce. All right, in a pan over medium heat, put a bit of oil, any cooking oil will do. And I think I put too much, so I am just going to use some paper towels and soak up some of that excess oil. You only need a light coating, so you don't want too much oil in your sauce. And once your pan is hot, about a minute, put in your corn and then spread it into a single layer and cook it for about 1 minute. We're just actually heating it up. Next, get your reserved pasta water and add about 2 tablespoons into the sauce or into the corn. Then stir it around. Next, add some salt and pepper and then stir it around again. And we're gonna let it simmer for maybe half a minute to a minute. And then we're gonna add more water. I'm adding 2 more tablespoons of pasta water and stirring that all in. And you can keep doing this until you have enough sauce to coat the amount of pasta that you've made. And we're going to let it simmer down until the sauce is a little thicker. And I'm using the edge of my cooking spoon to break up the large pieces of corn. And we're gonna do this for about another minute, and then your sauce is gonna be done. So the sauce is done, and I'm gonna toss in my cooked pasta and just stir it all in there. To garnish, you can add more salt and pepper if you'd like. I am going to take that lemon and just squeeze in a bit of juice on top of that pasta, and then take a bit of the zest of the lemon and sprinkle it on top. And that's it. So the pasta is done. So this is fresh handmade pasta with a corn lemon sauce. And I hope you enjoy it.